Complete Works of Swami Vivekananda. Volume 4. Addresses on Bhakti Yoga. The First Steps. The philosophers who wrote on Bhakti defined it as extreme love for God. Why a man should love God is the question to be solved. And until we understand that, we shall not be able to grasp the subject at all. There are two entirely different ideals of life. A man of any country who has any religion knows that he is a body and a spirit also. But there is a great deal of difference as to the goal of human life. In Western countries, as a rule, people lay more stress on the body aspect of man. Those philosophers who wrote on Bhakti in India laid stress on the spiritual side of man. And this difference seems to be typical of the Oriental and Occidental nations. It is so even in common language. In England, when speaking of death it is said, a man gave up his ghost. In India, a man gave up his body. The one idea is that man is a body and has a soul. The other that man is a soul and has a body. More intricate problems arise out of this. It naturally follows that the ideal which holds that man is a body and has a soul lays all the stress on the body. If you ask why man lives, you will be told it is to enjoy the senses, to enjoy possessions and wealth. He cannot dream of anything beyond even if he is told of it. His idea of a future life would be a continuation of this enjoyment. He is very sorry that it cannot continue all the time here, but he has to depart. And he thinks that somehow or other he will go to some place where the same thing will be renewed. He will have the same enjoyments, the same senses, only heightened and strengthened. He wants to worship God, because God is the means to attain this end. The goal of his life is enjoyment of sense objects, and he comes to know there is a being who can give him a very long lease of these enjoyments, and that is why he worships God. On the other hand, the Indian idea is that God is the goal of life. There is nothing beyond God, and the sense enjoyments are simply something through which we are passing now in the hope of getting better things. Not only so. It would be disastrous and terrible if man had nothing but sense enjoyments. In our everyday life we find that the less the sense enjoyments, the higher the life of the man. Look at the dog when he eats. No man ever ate with the same satisfaction. Observe the pig giving grunts of satisfaction as he eats. It is his heaven, and if the greatest archangel came and looked on, the pig would not even notice him. His whole existence is in his eating. No man was ever born who could eat that way. Think of the power of hearing in the lower animals, the power of seeing. All their senses are highly developed. Their enjoyment of the senses is extreme. They become simply mad with delight and pleasure. And the lower the man also, the more delight he finds in the senses. As he gets higher, the goal becomes reason and love. In proportion as these faculties develop, he loses the power of enjoying the senses. For illustration's sake, if we take for granted that a certain amount of power is given to man, and that can be spent either on the body, or the mind, or the spirit, then all the power spent on any one of these leaves just so much less to be expended on the others. The ignorant or savage races have much stronger sensual faculties than the civilized races, and this is, in fact, one of the lessons we learn from history, that as a nation becomes civilized the nerve organization becomes finer, and they become physically weaker. Civilize a savage race, and you will find the same thing. Another barbarian race comes up and conquers it. It is nearly always the barbarian race that conquers. We see then that if we desire only to have sense enjoyments all the time, we degrade ourselves to the brute state. A man does not know what he is asking for when he says he wants to go to a place where his sense enjoyments will be intensified. That he can only have by going down to the brutes. So with men desiring a heaven full of sense pleasures, they are like swine wallowing in the mire of the senses, unable to see anything beyond. This sense enjoyment is what they want, and the loss of it is the loss of heaven to them. These can never be Bhaktas in the highest sense of the word. They can never be true lovers of God. At the same time, though this lower ideal be followed for a time, it will also in course of time change. Each man will find that there is something higher, of which he did not know, and so this clinging to life and to things of the senses will gradually die away. When I was a little boy at school, I had a fight with another schoolfellow about some sweetmeats, and he being the stronger boy snatched them from my hand. I remember the feeling I had. I thought that boy was the most wicked boy ever born, and that as soon as I grew strong enough I would punish him. There was no punishment sufficient for his wickedness. We have both grown up now, and we are fast friends. This world is full of babies to whom eating and drinking, and all these little cakes are everything. They will dream of these cakes, and their idea of future life is where these cakes will be plentiful. Think of the American Indian who believes that his future life will be in a place which is a very good hunting ground. Each one of us has an idea of a heaven just as we want it to be. But in course of time, as we grow older and see higher things, we catch higher glimpses beyond. But let us not dispense with our ideas of future life in the ordinary way of modern times, by not believing in anything that is destruction. The agnostic who thus destroys everything is mistaken. The Bhakta sees higher. The agnostic does not want to go to heaven, because he has none. While the Bhakta does not want to go to heaven, because he thinks it is child's play. What he wants is God. What can be a higher end than God? God himself is the highest goal of man. See him, enjoy him. We can never conceive anything higher, because God is perfection. We cannot conceive of any higher enjoyment than that of love, but this word love has different meanings. It does not mean the ordinary selfish love of the world. It is blasphemy to call that love. The love for our children and our wives is mere animal love. That love which is perfectly unselfish is the only love, and that is of God. It is a very difficult thing to attain to. We are passing through all these different loves. Love of children, father, mother, and so forth. We slowly exercise the faculty of love. But in the majority of cases we never learn anything from it. We become bound to one step, to one person. In some cases men come out of this bondage. Men are ever running after wives and wealth and fame in this world. Sometimes they are hit very hard on the head, and they find out what this world really is. No one in this world can really love anything but God. Man finds out that human love is all hollow. Men cannot love though they talk of it. The wife says she loves her husband and kisses him. But as soon as he dies, the first thing she thinks about is the bank account, and what she shall do the next day. The husband loves the wife. But when she becomes sick and loses her beauty, or becomes haggard, or makes a mistake, he ceases to care for her. All the love of the world is hypocrisy and hollowness. A finite subject cannot love, nor a finite object be loved. When the object of the love of a man is dying every moment, and his mind also is constantly changing as he grows, what eternal love can you expect to find in the world? There cannot be any real love but in God. Why then all these loves? These are mere stages. There is a power behind impelling us forward. We do not know where to seek for the real object, but this love is sending us forward in search of it. Again and again we find out our mistake. We grasp something, and find it slips through our fingers, and then we grasp something else. Thus on and on we go, till at last comes light. We come to God, the only one who loves. His love knows no change and is ever ready to take us in. How long would any of you bear with me if I injured you? He in whose mind is no anger, hatred, or envy, who never loses his balance, dies, or is born, who is he but God? But the path to God is long and difficult, and very few people attain him. We are all babies struggling. Millions of people make a trade of religion. A few men in a century attain to that love of God, and the whole country becomes blessed and hallowed. When a Son of God appears, a whole country becomes blessed. It is true that few such are born in any one century in the whole world, but all should strive to attain that love of God. Who knows but you or I may be the next to attain? Let us struggle therefore. We say that a wife loves her husband. She thinks that her whole soul is absorbed in him. A baby comes and half of it goes out to the baby, or more. She herself will feel that the same love of husband does not exist now. So with the Father. We always find that when more intense objects of love come to us, the previous love slowly vanishes. Children at school think that some of their schoolfellows are the dearest beings that they have in life, or their fathers or mothers are so. Then comes their husband or wife, and immediately the old feeling disappears, and the new love becomes uppermost. One star arises, another bigger one comes, and then a still bigger one, and at last the sun comes, and all the lesser lights vanish. That sun is God. The stars are the smaller loves. When that sun bursts upon him, a man becomes mad, what Emerson calls a God-intoxicated man. Man becomes transfigured into God. Everything is merged in that one ocean of love. Ordinary love is mere animal attraction. Otherwise, why is the distinction between the sexes? If one kneels before an image, it is dreadful idolatry. But if one kneels before husband or wife, it is quite permissible. The world presents to us manifold stages of love. We have first to clear the ground. Upon our view of life the whole theory of love will rest. To think that this world's is the aim and end of life is brutal and degenerating. Any man who starts in life with that idea degenerates himself. He will never rise higher, he will never catch this glimpse from behind, he will always be a slave to the senses. He will struggle for the dollar that will get him a few cakes to eat. Better die than live that life. Slaves of this world, slaves of the senses, let us rouse ourselves. There is something higher than this sense life. Do you think that man, the infinite spirit, was born to be a slave to his eyes, his nose, and his ears? There is an infinite, omniscient spirit behind that can do everything, break every bond. And that spirit we are, and we get that power through love. This is the ideal we must remember. We cannot, of course, get it in a day. We may fancy that we have it, but it is a fancy after all. It is a long, long way off. We must take man where he stands, and help him upwards. Man stands in materialism. You and I are materialists. Our talking about God and Spirit is good, but it is simply the vogue in our society to talk thus. We have learned it parrot-like and repeat it. So we have to take ourselves where we are as materialists, and must take the help of matter and go on slowly until we become real spiritualists, and feel ourselves spirits, understand the spirit, and find that this world which we call the infinite is but a gross external form of that world which is behind, but something besides that is necessary. You read in the Sermon on the Mount, "Ask, and it shall be given to you, seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." The difficulty is, who seeks, who wants? We all say we know God. One man writes a book to disprove God, another to prove him. One man thinks it his duty to prove him all his life. Another, to disprove him, and he goes about to teach man there is no God. What is the use of writing a book either to prove or disprove God? What does it matter to most people whether there is a God or not? The majority of men work just like a machine with no thought of God and feeling no need of him. Then one day comes death and says, "Come." The man says, "Wait a little, I want a little more time." I want to see my son grow a little bigger. But death says, come at once. So it goes on. So goes poor John. What shall we say to poor John? He never found anything in which God was the highest. Perhaps he was a pig in the past, and he is much better as a man. But there are some who get a little awakening. Some misery comes, someone whom we love most dies, that upon which we had bent our whole soul, that for which we had cheated the whole world and perhaps our own brother, that vanishes, and a blow comes to us. Perhaps a voice comes in our soul and asks, what after this? Sometimes death comes without a blow, but such cases are few. Most of us, when anything slips through our fingers, say, what next? How we cling to the senses. You have heard of a drowning man clutching at a straw. A man will clutch at a straw first, and when it fails, he will say someone must help him. Still people must, as the English phrase goes, sow their wild oats, before they can rise to higher things. Bhakti is a religion. Religion is not for the many, that is impossible. A sort of knee drill, standing up and sitting down, may be suited for the many. But religion is for the few. There are in every country only a few hundreds who can be, and will be religious. The others cannot be religious, because they will not be awakened, and they do not want to be. The chief thing is to want God. We want everything except God, because our ordinary wants are supplied by the external world. It is only when our necessities have gone beyond the external world that we want a supply from the internal, from God. So long as our needs are confined within the narrow limits of this physical universe, we cannot have any need for God. It is only when we have become satiated with everything here that we look beyond for a supply. It is only when the need is there that the demand will come. Have done with this child's play of the world as soon as you can, and then you will feel the necessity of something beyond the world, and the first step in religion will come. There is a form of religion which is fashionable. My friend has much furniture in her parlor. It is the fashion to have a Japanese vase, so she must have one even if it costs $1,000. In the same way she will have a little religion and join a church. Bhakti is not for such. That is not want. Want is that without which we cannot live. We want breath, we want food, we want clothes. Without them we cannot live. When a man loves a woman in this world, there are times when he feels that without her he cannot live, although that is a mistake. When a husband dies, the wife thinks she cannot live without him. But she lives all the same. This is the secret of necessity. It is that without which we cannot live. Either it must come to us or we die. When the time comes that we feel the same about God, or in other words, we want something beyond this world, something above all material forces, then we may become bhaktas. What are our little lives when for a moment the cloud passes away, and we get one glimpse from beyond, and for that moment all these lower desires seem like a drop in the ocean. Then the soul grows, and feels the want of God, and must have Him. The first step is, what do we want? Let us ask ourselves this question every day, do we want God? You may read all the books in the universe, but this love is not to be had by the power of speech, not by the highest intellect, not by the study of various sciences. He who desires God will get love, unto him God gives himself. Love is always mutual, reflective. You may hate me, and if I want to love you, you repulse me. But if I persist, in a month or a year you are bound to love me. It is a well-known psychological phenomenon. As the loving wife thinks of her departed husband, with the same love we must desire the Lord, and then we will find God, and all books and the various sciences would not be able to teach us anything. By reading books we become parrots. No one becomes learned by reading books. If a man reads but one word of love, he indeed becomes learned. So we want first to get that desire. Let us ask ourselves each day, do we want God's when we begin to talk religion, and especially when we take a high position and begin to teach others? We must ask ourselves the same question. I find many times that I don't want God, I want bread more. I may go mad if I don't get a piece of bread. Many ladies will go mad if they don't get a diamond pin, but they do not have the same desire for God. They do not know the only reality that is in the universe. There is a proverb in our language. If I want to be a hunter, I'll hunt the rhinoceros. If I want to be a robber, I'll rob the king's treasury. What is the use of robbing beggars or hunting ants? So if you want to love God. Who cares for these things of the world? This world is utterly false. All the great teachers of the world found that out. There is no way out of it but through God. He is the goal of our life. All ideas that the world is the goal of life are pernicious. This world and this body have their own value, a secondary value, as a means to an end. But the world should not be the end. Unfortunately, too often we make the world the end and God the means. We find people going to church and saying, God, give me such and such. God, heal my disease. They want nice healthy bodies. And because they hear that someone will do this work for them, they go and pray to him. It is better to be an atheist than to have such an idea of religion. As I have told you, this Bhakti is the highest ideal. I don't know whether we shall reach it or not in millions of years to come, but we must make it our highest ideal, make our senses aim at the highest. If we cannot get to the end, we shall at least come nearer to it. We have slowly to work through the world and the senses to reach God.